I want to thank you all. There are 56 of us currently here in the learning community. I want to thank you all for making the time to join this learning community conversation that will focus on the theory and practice of motivational interviewing. And I will just give you a brief introduction to myself, and then we'll take care of a couple of logistical things. But there's one thing after I give the brief introduction to myself, there's one thing I have to make very clear to everybody who's joined us in the learning community today, okay? And I bet some of you are anticipating what I'm going to say, but maybe you're not. So my name is Paul. I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to be here with all of you to guide this conversation on the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing. I am currently a research project director at the New York State Psychiatric Institute in Manhattan. I am also a social worker by training and a graduate of Hunter College School of Social Work in New York City, with a particular emphasis on group development and group facilitation. I am also fortunate to be a senior staff trainer and curriculum writer for the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center, one of the ATTC networks. Now, you did hear me mention Caribbean. There are times when I've been forced to go to Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, and yeah, it is amazing. It's been many, many years since I've been forced, so please send good vibes my way that I will be broadcasting a learning community conversation from Puerto Rico. Anyway, I also began my direct service career in 1991, providing direct care and services to people living. Thank you, Levon. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I'm sending them right back to you that maybe you'll be in Puerto Rico when I'm doing the training, and excellent. I began my social service career in 1991, providing direct services and care to people living with HIV and AIDS. And I did that for a little over 12 years, from 1991 to 2003, when I made the transition into exclusively focusing on workforce development through curriculum development and training. The one final thing that I will share with you in regard to my background, which is, I think, particularly relevant to our conversation and our time together, is that I am very fortunate to be a member of MINT, which is the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. It's an international organization of people who practice motivational interviewing and who train on motivational interviewing. We just recently had our forum, which was in the exotic location of Minneapolis. Now, I have to say, I know, Jaleesa, I know, but I had never been to Minneapolis before, and I really liked it. It was great. No, Jaleesa says, no way, down with Minneapolis. I get it. Trust me, I understand. There's a lot that's gone on in Minneapolis. I get it. I get it. And that's very apparent there. I will say, though, that the conference was extraordinary this year. And to be honest, I've been a member of Mint since 2017, and I think this is one of the best forums that I have ever attended. The workshops were of very high quality, and Dr. Miller, one of the creators of MI, Bill Miller, gave a very, very inspirational talk. Tammy said, Jaleesa and Tammy say, it was 23 degrees driving to work today. I hear you. I hear you. I think it's like 40 something where I am today. So I'm really thrilled that all of you have made the time to be here. There are 60 of us in the learning community now. I hope that we will be, all 60 of us will be together from the beginning to the end. And that's my hope. And, you know, we'll see what happens, but that's my hope. Now, this is the thing that I need to let everybody know before I share my screen and we cover a couple of logistics. This is a 6-hour curriculum. Today is 2 hours, Monday is 2 hours, next Monday, and then next Thursday is 2 hours. In order to receive credit for your participation, you must attend all 3 parts. Unfortunately, folks, and I'm sorry to have to say this, we can't give partial credit and we can't give makeups for this. So if your goal is to get 6 hours of credentialing hours, you do need to be here for all 3 parts. I want to let you know that up front and say this. If you don't care about the credit and you're only going to stay for today or however long, that's perfectly okay. If you do care about, yep, Jackie, the dates are next Monday and next Thursday at the same time, and also 2 hours. Okay. If you do care about the credit and you really need and want the credit, again, in order to receive it, you must be here and participate. Mawahi, wonderful. Wonderful to have you back. A colleague who was in an earlier training who brought a lot of insight and wisdom to the training. So welcome back, Mawahi.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good to see you again. Is Ishmael here too? No? Okay. All right. All right. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see him again in the future as well. Please give him my regards. So I just want to acknowledge, folks, that you all understand that. And you can wave, you can nod, you can give me a thumbs up, you can count out cash directly, whatever works best for me. I mean you. So that is again, if you don't care about the credit and you can only come to 1 or 2 parts, you are welcome. You are more than welcome to be here. But again, and Levon, thank you for putting it in writing. And for those of you who are giving electronic thumbs up, thank you, Sonia, and others. Thank you so much. So just keep in mind, folks, that we are going to have 3 2-hour sessions together. I'm going to share my screen, and if a couple of you would be willing to unmute and just verbally let me know, oh, we can see the screen, that would be good. Thank you, Yari. That would be great. And the rest of you, if you can just type the letter Y in the chat to let me know you can see the screen. Now, don't type the letter Y yet, Larry and others, because I haven't shown the screen yet. But I'm going to show, and I appreciate your practice. That's great. I'm going to, oh, wonderful, Virginia. Yes, Virginia is for lovers. That's a very old travel sort of line, Vivian. I haven't heard that in a long time. So folks, I'm gonna share my screen now. And again, those of you who are willing to unmute and let me know, and the rest of you, this is your cue to type the letter Y in the chat if you can see the title slide. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it looks like some people are typing in the chat that they can see it too. So let me just make sure.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Oh, good, good. It looks like other people can see it too. Okay, thanks, Shalisa and Tammy. Fantastic. All right, so here we are. This is the title of the course. I think it's important to show the title slide because sometimes people realize, oh, that's not really the training that I meant to go to. So the title slide can often be a clarifying opportunity. Folks, my hope is that this will be a conversation between all of us in the learning community. What I would ask is that as we have this conversation, that you are willing to consider and practice using language that is welcoming, respectful, and inclusive of everybody. And I think there are 62 of us now. Yep, 62 of us in the learning community. Because we're a learning community, what we bring to the table, what Hannah may say and share in terms of what she knows, what I may say, what Victor may say, may not necessarily represent the official positions of our funder, and that's okay, because this is meant to be a relevant and real conversation for us to have, so that you can actually conclude this 6 hours and walk away with something that's of benefit to you, that is actually going to support you in what you're already doing or add to the effectiveness of what you're doing. Again, I will say welcome back. And if you have not yet, and this is probably the last time I'll say it today, I will say it the next 2 times as well, but the last time I'm saying it today, if you have not yet typed your full name and where you're from in the chat, please do that. That is our timestamp that says for part 1, you are here, and we know you're here, your first and last name, where you're from, and if you're sharing your computer with anybody, please type their last name, first name and last name, and where they're from in the chat as well. There will be an evaluation, not at the end of today, but at the end of part 3. And I'm going to do my best to leave time at that particular point so that you can complete the evaluation, and we'll still hopefully end on time. All right, and it looks like a couple of other people typed their names in the chat. Let me just quickly check that. Yep, okay, very good, very good. Thank you so much. All right. So, a couple of additional guidelines in addition to the language we use as we interact with each other. If you're able to, if your camera is working, if indeed that works for your particular learning needs or style, and if it doesn't, that's okay. You don't need to be on camera if that just doesn't work for you, or if circumstances are preventing you from doing that, or technical problems are preventing you from doing that. What I would ask, though, is if you're on camera and you're able to be on camera, if you're going to step away, and I know it's possible that something may come up that you may have to attend to, just send me a direct message. You don't need to share it with everybody, and just let me know you'll be right back. And then just come back. You don't need to send me another message, and just turn your camera back on. For those of you who, for whatever educational or circumstantial reason, are not going to be on camera today, please just send me a direct message. Again, you don't need to share this with anybody. You don't need to tell me why. Just let me know in a direct message that you're not going to be on camera. I would greatly appreciate that. And I understand if that's the situation, and I'm just glad you're here. Because there are 61 of us in the learning community at this particular point, I don't know what happened to 62, but maybe they'll come back. What I would ask is that everybody would remain muted until or when you have something you want to add, information, a reaction, a thought. You are more than welcome to unmute. So when I'm talking, it's perfectly okay for you to interrupt me mid-sentence. I don't mind that. I welcome it. I really want us to have a conversation. What I would ask, though, if Wanda has the floor, and if Wanda is making a point, that nobody else interrupt Wanda. Let her make her point. Let's show her the respect of listening to what she has to say. And then if you want to make a point, again, I'll do my best to make space for you to do that. And again, that goes for Wanda and everybody else in the learning community. Okay? You can interrupt me, but please don't interrupt each other. And then the last guideline that I'll ask is that please speak from the I. I know this, I learned this, I feel this particular way. Now I'm going to advance the slide for just a moment and take the slides down for a minute. And I'm just going to ask, and again, for those of you who I can see, you can give me a visual acknowledgement. For those of you who I can't see, you can type it in the chat, or you can use an electronic reaction. Can everybody agree to those guidelines of how we'll act together? You can wave, nod, throw money. Excellent, excellent, very good, very good, very good, very good. Those are our guidelines. that is how we'll. Paulette, do you want to ask a question, or were you just agreeing with the guidelines? Agreeing with the guidelines. Agreeing with the guidelines. Okay, great. All right. Excellent. Good, good, good. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. And as I cover this, I'm not sharing my screen yet, but as I cover the goal and the learning objectives, I'm going to ask everybody to ponder a question. And I'm going to get a sense that we are fortunate to have a very diverse learning community for this 6-hour conversation. But the question I'm going to ask you to ponder, and we'll have a conversation about this, the question that I'm going to ask you to ponder is, what do you know about motivational interviewing? You don't need to put anything in the chat right now. You don't need to unmute and say anything right now. I'm just going to cover the goal and the learning objectives. What I ask, though, is that you think about that question. What do you already know about motivational interviewing? Okay, so have that in your mind while you're finishing your breakfast and while I'm covering the guidelines. Jaleesa, hey, if you got to eat, you got to eat, right? That's perfectly okay. I'm going to share my screen. You should feel free to eat at any moment. And if it's really good, just make sure you share it with me. All right. So first and foremost, I would have to say that there are two primary goals to this learning community conversation. The first one is that after the 6 hours, my hope is that if we were to meet up again in 3 months, we would have a shared language. So I could say to Nadia, remember when we talked about X, Y, and Z? And Nadia would be like, yeah, I remember that, because that is, she remembers, because that is the concept that we were focusing on. So my hope is at the end of this 6 hours that we are going to have a shared language and a shared understanding of what this evidence-based practice is. And it can be very easy to intellectually understand it. The second goal that is really kind of added in this one is that my hope is that we're also going to get to examine and bite into the practice of motivational interviewing. Because what often happens with MI trainings, folks, is there's a lot of time that's spent on the informational component. So people walk away knowing what ORS is, and they're not actually able to practice motivational interviewing. Because motivational interviewing actually takes practice, and it takes reflection on that practice, and it also takes feedback about your practice in order to refine what you're doing and become more proficient and skilled at it. So hopefully we're going to all be on the same page in terms of the knowledge and the understanding, and we're going to have a deeper look into the actual practice of motivational interviewing. To that end, these are a couple, they all came up at once, that's great. These are a couple of learning objectives, 5, that are for the whole 6 hours. They're not just for today, this is for the whole 6 hours, okay? My hope is that we will be able to cover each and every one of these in some form or fashion, okay? It is a robust, I think, set of objectives, and I think it will be possible for us to cover them. I want to draw your attention to bullet 3 on the slide and bullet 5 on the slide. So bullet 3, and I'm going to read it to you, and this may be the only time you hear me actually read from the slide, but I'm going to read it to you out loud, and you can of course see it hopefully here. It's in fairly large print. Describe the relationship between MI, motivational interviewing, client-centered counseling, and the trans-theoretical model of change, or the stages of change model. One thing I hope that we're all going to walk away with and be very clear is about the relationship that these have in common and how they are different. Because MI is not the same thing as client-centered counseling, and it is not the same thing as the stages of change model. The fifth bullet, demonstrate the selective and intentional use of MI. Now, as I read that out loud, I want to edit it. And I'm going to say it this way now. Demonstrate the selective and intentional use of the practice of MI. My hope is that you will have a very clear understanding of when we are practicing motivational interviewing. We are being very selective and we are being very intentional. And there's an absolutely technical part of the effective practice of motivational interviewing. So I just wanted to highlight those two, but all of these we will touch on in some form or fashion. Now, I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Okay, good. People are sending me messages about the camera. Nadia, you thought who disbanded? And feel free if you want to unmute and say that, or if you want to put it in the chat.
I went to graduate school in 1996.
Yeah.
And the texts we were using at the time, we were trained with Prochaska's stages of change, and then with an overlay of motivational interviewing of what kind of concepts to apply at each stage. And then I'd say about 5 years ago, this lady was training in motivational interviewing, and she said they now keep them very separate. So I wasn't sure how all that worked, but I'm sure you're going to tell us.
Well, Nadia, since you brought it up, and clearly this is creating a wonderful transition into what do you know about motivational interviewing? But to your point, Dr. Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick worked with Prochaska and DiClemente, and they wrote a joint article together that talked about the trans theoretical model and talked about the practice of motivational interviewing. And unfortunately, because of that article, people conflated the two. They linked them together and said, oh, MI is the same thing as the trans theoretical model of stages of change. Now, it's funny because Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick, after they realized that they'd created this misunderstanding because of the joint article, they wrote another article, which people may find very interesting. I do. I still reread this article occasionally. It's called The 10 Things MI Is Not. And 2 of them are on this list. It's not client-centered counseling, and it is not the stages of change model. So to your point, Nadia, about the overlay of the two, the reason that there is a relationship is because the trans theoretical model, or the stages of change, talks about the process that people go through as they're considering a change, as they take actions to make a change, as they maintain making the change, and sometimes they resume the behavior before the change. And that's called resumption. And the stages of change is looking at the overarching process of the change process. Motivational interviewing, the practice of MI, is a way to engage in an intentional type of conversation about a change that somebody is considering. So stages of change, overview of the whole process. Motivational interviewing, method of conversation, to talk with somebody about a specific change they may be considering. Nadia, any thoughts, any reactions to that?
No, I appreciate how you explained that, because I never I agree with both of what you're saying, and that's how I conceptualized it, but you're the first person who's ever said that. So it's nice to hear that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. And I'm just going to quickly check the chat because I think some other things may have come in. Oh, okay. Not a problem. All right. So folks, we're going to move now, if it's okay with you, and you can let me know if it's okay with you. Can we begin our conversation? And actually, Nadia has already begun it, but could we continue our conversation about what you do know about MI? What do you know about MI right now? Okay. Is it all right if we continue that? You can nod, you can wave, you can give a thumb. Thanks, Victor. You can give a thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you, Heather. Fantastic. All right, great. All right. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, great. And people are saying that it's okay to go on with the conversation. Great. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to say two things. Thing one, I just used an intentional closed question. Can we continue with the conversation? Asking you permission. That was intentional. Okay. Thing two, we will now move into, and Nadine started us off, but we will move into what does any, or I'm sorry, Nadia started us off. Sorry, Nadia. Anybody else want to, yep, not a problem, Jackie. Does anybody else want to unmute and let us know what you know about motivational interviewing already? Okay, go ahead, Crystal. The floor is yours.
All
And
right, and sorry that my
Mawahi, you'll go second, okay?
all
Go ahead,
right.
Crystal.
So about motivational interviewing, I know that it's a style of person-centered discussion to help people move throughout the stages of change in a way that is kind of driven by them. It's a way to help them identify barriers to change. It removes any of the clinicians' goals. It helps them focus on their goals, to identify any ambivalence they have, to remove any resistance they have within themselves, not resistance to us. So anything is because we can't resist because it's not our goal. We have no goals in motivational interviewing. It's to help them identify what their goals actually are, any barriers they may have either internally or externally to reaching their goals, and to help them define strategies and identify strategies to identify what those things are, that they have those kind of little roadblocks. So it's our little technique that kind of helps them kind of travel through those roadblocks and, just kind of, I guess, I'll say like Mario punch the bricks that might be in the way.
Okay. Crystal, thank you for adding to what Nadia already started to lay on the table. And there are many things that I could underline in terms of what Crystal just said, but I do want to underline one in particular, and then we're going to go to Mawahi. The one I want to underline in particular, hey, there's Ishmael. Is that Ishmael with Brenda? Is it? Excellent. All right. Welcome back. Excellent. I'm used to seeing you with Mawahi. So, folks, the thing to keep in mind, the other thing that Crystal said, yes, it's theirs, but it's their motivations. We are helping them to get in touch with their motivations about the particular change that they may be considering. And again, I do want to underline, Crystal, you emphasized it really, I think, appropriately and into the right scale. It's their change, not our change. Okay? Yeah. And Shamika agrees with you, Crystal. Mawahi, the floor is yours, please.
Yep. I was going to say, Crystal, that was a mic drop explanation. Thank you so much. You definitely hit all the angles. What motivational interviewing has been for me is definitely a tool that coincides with the stages of changes to be able to identify where individual or client may be at in those stages. And what the motivational interviewer is the tool to kind of help deal with some of those mixed feelings about changes. So definitely mic drop to you, Crystal.
Well, agreed, Mawahi, agreed. And I must say, you emphasized something that Crystal also mentioned, because Crystal mentioned ambivalence about the particular change. And Mawahi, you framed it, which I think is very accurate as well, as mixed feelings. The person can have mixed feelings. Part of them wants to, another part of them doesn't want to. I noticed that Antonio Ramirez put something in the chat. And again, anybody else who wants to unmute. Antonio wrote, MI is one of the most powerful and essential approaches in substance use disorders counseling because it aligns with the core truth about recovery. Lasting change must come from within the individual, not from external pressure. Okay? Denisha adds, excellent, all caps, explanation, Crystal. Another mic drop, Mawahi. And Brenda adds, MI can be empowering for clients as well. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else? What do you know about motivational interviewing? What do you already know about it? Agreed, Mawahi. I think Antonio said that quite well. Any other things that you know about it? Go ahead, Sarah. You're unmuted. Was that a happy accident or did you intend?
It was, I'm kind of thinking about what I want to say. I would say for me, I know some of the terms like the writing reflex and oars and things like that. What I'm looking forward to is hearing more about how to put it in practice.
Yep. The whole
Mhm.
idea that you can know the information, but actually putting it into practice. Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes.
Levon adds, MI is built on change talk and sustain talk. You listen for language around change. Welcome back, Jackie. Levon, if you're able to, can you unmute and say a little more about that? If you're able and willing. And then we're going to go to Clara. I just want to see if Levon, you want to, if you can or want to add anything to that. Because I want to link what Levon wrote in the chat, Sarah, with what you said, because Levon is using two very distinct terms that are related to MI, which is change talk and sustain talk. Those are two types of language that we may hear from the person. Okay? And again, Levon, at any point, if you're able to or you want to, and you want to say anything, elaborate on that at all, don't hesitate to unmute to do so. Clara, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
Perfect. I think that one of the things that I like the most is the ruler, right? So, hey, on a scale of 0 or 10, like how important is the change? How can you get from a 3 to a 10, and kind of put that ball in their court of coming up with those ideas of like, hey, I don't think I can change. Okay, well, why do you think you can't? And let's kind of work on what we can.
Thank you. And Clara, you're identifying one of the strategies that can be used when practicing motivational interviewing. And I'm going to add this, not to be confusing, but I want to be clear, is that you can be using that strategy and not be practicing motivational interviewing. Just using the strategy alone, just like, and Sarah, you mentioned this, you mentioned oars, just like using open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries alone does not necessarily mean that you're practicing motivational interviewing. This is where the intentionality comes in. And this is about the practice, Sarah. There is an intention behind what you're saying or what you're doing. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Clara. And thanks for putting that in, because many people are very familiar with the scaling questions, which are basically a specific kind of open-ended question. You can ask importance, confidence, and readiness. And time permitting, we may go over that in a little more detail, and you may see it actually played out. Migdalia wrote, MI also supports the patient client, and it utilizes empathy and respects the person in a safe and supportive environment. Absolutely, Migdalia. It's really beautifully and so clearly put, because that's about how we are when we're practicing motivational interviewing. So I want to introduce, based on what Migdalia said, I want you to be able to think about motivational interviewing in 3 particular ways. Think about it in a relational way, which is what Migdalia is talking about. Think about it from a technical perspective, which is what Clara and Sarah were talking about in terms of the tools or the skills we use, or the open-ended questions that we might use. And then I want you to think, the third way is I want you to think about the relational and the technical elements fusing together in an intentional way to accomplish an intentional goal. Because P.S., when we're practicing MI, we are guiding toward a goal. But it's the person's goal, as Crystal said, not our goal. Okay. Levon says his unmute button is acting funky right now. Straighten up, unmute button. We need you to work so we can hear Levon's voice. Let's hope that works out, Levon. Antonio writes, people struggling with addiction often come into treatment feeling judged, controlled, or coerced by courts, family, employers, or even their own guilt. Very insightful point. MI recognizes that true recovery cannot be forced. Instead of telling clients what to do, MI empowers them to decide for themselves why and how they want to change. Antonio, I see that your hand's up. Please take the floor. It's yours.
Grand Rising, Paul. Grand Rising, everyone. The reason why I'm putting those in the chat is because I'm not just a SUD counselor. I'm also a drug court liaison. So I deal with a lot of people that strive to be resistant, strive to not accept what's in front of them. So when the young lady said change talk versus sustain talk, I don't even come in with change talk. That's later. I just can't approach them with that. They've had too much of that, My job is to normalize it as possible.
Yeah.
Understand and let them understand that I'm here for you. What works for you, and how can I don't want to walk behind you. I don't want to walk in front of you. The process that I'm trying to establish with you is together we walk side by side and see what it is that we can accomplish. I like to consider me as your recovery lawyer, and the only thing I ask is that you be open and honest about everything. I don't care. I'm not here to judge you. I just want the best for you. So help me to help you.
And Antonio, I want to underline something that you added, because I think it's important to consider this, folks. What Antonio just said, and Antonio is being very modest. He knows a lot about motivational interviewing. He uses motivational interviewing in his work, and he brings great insight to, I think, what he does. And Victor, I see that you're unmuted, so we'll go right to you. I want to underline, though, that what Antonio is pointing out, and I'm going to use a phrase that many people may be familiar with, is doing first things first. And what Antonio gave a great description of is how we want to build intentionally and invest in the relational sphere of motivational interviewing before we rush into the technical sphere of it. Because if we move to the technical without the relational, the outcomes are not as... Antonio, are you okay with that? That I kind of restated what you said in that way? Because I really got that from what you said.
Absolutely, you're on point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. So keep in mind, folks, you want to also think about timing. And the only way you know about timing is by attending to the person's reactions and attending to how they're talking with us. So, Victor, the floor is yours, and then we're going to look at what a couple of other people wrote in the chat, but the floor is yours. Go ahead, Victor.
Okay, so, I've been in the field over 30 years, and what's clear to me is that nothing is clear.
Okay,
So,
love that.
so during one period, it's okay to do it. Another period, it's not okay to do it. But the main thing here is that we're listening to the client, let them set the goals, achievable goals, what they feel is achievable, not what we feel is achievable. And then they work on the goals. And we're there to listen to them and whenever possible, help them achieve the goal.
Yes, I would agree with that, Victor. And I do feel in order to give a full picture of the practice of MI, I do need to add something to what you're saying. So please tell me if you have a reaction to this or if you have a question about it, okay? You'll tell me if you have a question or a reaction?
Sure.
Okay, great. So the only thing I want to add or build on what Victor said, because I don't want this to be misunderstood. Many people say, I practice motivational interviewing. I let my clients exercise their autonomy. I listen to my clients. I'm practicing motivational interviewing. You may not be. Because the thing that makes it the practice of MI is what you're intentionally doing during that conversation. It's not passive, and don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that listening is passive. Listening takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy. And when you're practicing MI, you're doing something with what you're hearing. You're putting what you're hearing intentionally to work to achieve a particular goal. Okay, and I'm going to underline that very specifically before we conclude today. So Victor, I just have to check in with you before I go forward. Do you have any thought, reaction, or question? Are you okay with me adding that to what you said?
No, it's fine that you added, what you added. My thing is that, so in the beginning we said that MI is not counseling and it's not the stages of change.
Correct.
But what I'm hearing is that everybody's throwing that into the MI theory.
Yes, and I agree with you. I'm hearing that too, because there's a relationship between all of them. And Victor, your point's well taken, and let me make that very clear. You can't be practicing motivational interviewing unless you're also being client-centered.
Right.
You can be client-centered and not be practicing motivational interviewing. Okay? You can be aware of the stage of change that somebody is in. And let's just say, for the purposes of our example, the person's in contemplation. And contemplation means that the person is thinking, yeah, I'm thinking about this change. I'm not doing anything about it, but I'm thinking about it. So you can be having a conversation with them about what they're thinking, but unless you're doing something specific with that, you're not necessarily practicing motivational interviewing. And let me be very clear. If Sonia and I were having a conversation and Sonia was practicing motivational interviewing and that conversation was recorded, we could use validated instruments, and there are a number of them. I use one that's called the MITI, the Mighty. We could use a validated instrument and we could together listen to Sonia's conversation, and we could tell if Sonia was practicing MI. We could tell what tools she was using while she was practicing MI. We could identify what her strengths were while she was practicing MI, and we could identify if there were any growth opportunities. So I want you to keep in mind that motivational interviewing is verifiable. So you really can either be doing it or not doing it. And my hope is that by our conclusion of our time today, we'll all be very clear about what that is. Crystal, the floor is yours.
Right. And I also just wanted to add, and so even with motivational interviewing, some of us also use motivational enhancement therapy.
Sure.
So they seem so close because motivational interviewing is entwined as part of the motivational enhancement therapy, which is a therapy. It is an actual treatment modality. So I think that's also another reason, like it sounds like we are mentioning counseling too, because that's another thing that it's really a strong part of. So I know that when I'm a clinical addiction specialist and a clinical social worker, and so I use MET for both of them. I use it strongly in my addictions work, but I also use it in mental health and co-occurring quite a bit. So that they just really dovetail so significantly, that they kind of end up kind of following the same line. So
Yeah, and Crystal, you're making a really good point, because one of the things that the data begins to really bear out in terms of the practice of motivational interviewing, folks, and there are probably over 2,300 scientific studies that shed light on the effectiveness of this evidence-based practice. It, along with cognitive behavioral therapy, it's probably one of the most studied evidence-based practices. What the data actually shows, folks, is that MI can be woven in and out whatever type of therapeutic approach. You could be practicing cognitive behavioral therapy. You could be practicing, as Crystal said, motivational enhancement therapy. You can be doing different kinds of therapy, and there can be absolute appropriate moments when you'd make the transition into practicing motivational interviewing. And there are particular circumstances where you would do that. I want to just take a quick look at what people put in the chat. Vivian wrote, MI builds the road to effective communication and assures the client that they are seen, heard, and capable. Yes. And Vivian, one of many things that I could pull out of that is I want to underline that MI, the practice of MI, is decidedly strengths-based. It's focusing on a person's strengths. And walking in with the thought that the person already has in them what they need to go forward. You're not providing it, they've got it already. Hannah writes, big emphasis on client determination in MI. As best I understand it, Hannah, you understand it very clearly. It is absolutely autonomy, and client self-determination is essential to the practice of motivational interviewing. Levon writes, you're listening for wanting, needing, or being able to change and reflect back. Yes, so Levon is being very clear about what he's tuning his ear for, what he's listening for when the person is talking. And you also noted that you want to reflect it back. And that's one of many options. Reflecting back what the person is saying can be very powerful. But again, we do that selectively and intentionally. Okay. So Mawahi, you said this earlier, that you like what Antonio said about being a recovery lawyer. Yeah. Okay. Paulette says, I just realized I took this course earlier this year. Yes, you may have done that, Paulette. And you're more than welcome to stay if you want, or if you need to go along, that's okay too. Thank you, Mawahi. I appreciate your kind words there. I'm really trying to make this as clear and as graspable as I can. Antonio Ramirez writes, MI aligns with the ethical and spiritual heart of counseling to meet people with compassion, dignity, and belief in their potential for change rather than pathologizing the client. MI sees them as a human being navigating complex emotions and choices. It brings humanity back into addiction counseling, making space for healing and connection. Yes. And I want to touch on this because Antonio, you're adding something that you're repeating something that you said before, and Crystal touched on this too. Most people know motivational interviewing through its use with substance use disorders or substance use issues. People associate motivational interviewing with substance use issues. You can use motivational interviewing with any type of behavior change that a person feels ambivalent about. Let me give two concrete examples. Let's just say, for the purposes of an example, somebody, I'm not naming anybody, but somebody might want to cut down the amount of sugar that they consume in their diet. And part of them wants to cut down the amount of sugar they're consuming, and another part of them doesn't want to cut down the amount of sugar that they're consuming. They are ambivalent. They have mixed feelings, as Mawahi said, about this particular behavioral change goal. That is an opportunity to practice motivational interviewing because they're ambivalent about a particular behavior change. Okay? And Shamika says, that's me. I'm ambivalent about. Okay. Yes, you're that ambivalent somebody. Excellent. Good. And Lunia writes, are we clarifying that MI is a tool, method, not a therapeutic modality? Very interesting question. It is framed as a method of communication about behavior change. It can be used within a therapeutic context. So it's a method of communication about a behavior change that somebody is considering. Yeah. Lunia, does that help clarify for you, or would you like to say more about that if you're able to unmute?
Yes, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, and Shamika writes, oh, right, I read that. That's you. And you got a heart on that, Shamika. It could be there's somebody else that might share that with you. So, okay. Nobody needs to identify themselves, but that's okay. So we'll get to that later. So the point is, folks, is that there's a heavy emphasis on associating motivational interviewing almost exclusively with substance use. It can be used for any behavior change that somebody is ambivalent about. And the reason that there's such a heavy association is because that's where most of the research has been done. That's where the money has been to do the research in substance use. It can be used for any behavior change that someone is ambivalent about. Okay? Now, it's funny because I developed this course and I've had the opportunity to deliver this course probably since 2004. So I guess that's about maybe 20 something years. And I want to say that this course and the emphasis of this course has evolved because MI has evolved. Many of you may know we're in Miller and Rolnick's 4th edition of their book, Motivational Interviewing, Helping People Change and Grow. That's the 4th edition of their book. and it has changed from the third edition. Most of the changes are more linguistic. I'll give a concrete example. Somebody mentioned the writing reflex. That's mentioned in the book. It's now called the fixing reflex. Same thing, just has a, exactly, Mawai, exactly. It has a different name, okay? So just keeping that in mind. The information that we're going to focus on is from the fourth edition of the book. Is anybody, I'm very curious, and you can, if you are, you can wave your hands and nod, or you can put it in the chat. And if you're not waving your hands and nodding, please put it in the chat. But I'm very curious, is anybody familiar with the phrase rolling with resistance? Is anybody familiar with that? Yeah, a bunch of people are familiar with that. Okay. If you're familiar with it, no. Jackie says no. Clara says, a lot of people are saying yes. Yes. Brenda says yes. Okay. Yep. Okay. Sandy says no. All right. And Caroline says it's hard to do. Well, Caroline, don't worry, because it's not used anymore. It's not called rolling with resistance anymore, because resistance is actually looked at very differently now. That actually, I think, was in the second edition. I don't even think it made it into the third edition. And it's definitely not in the fourth edition. So that phrase, that terminology, that perspective is not really used anymore. So I only mention these things because things change with motivational interviewing. It's very dynamic, and that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. So what I was saying about this particular course is I'm going to, in a moment, ask for 2 volunteers. And I'm going to ask for these volunteers to be able to read a pre-written scenario. The only qualification is that hopefully you will be able to see the scenario when I put it up on the screen. The type will be big enough. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I can see it without my glasses. So hopefully you could see it. And the only other qualification to volunteer to be one of the readers is that I'm just going to ask if you could speak loud enough so everybody in the learning community can hear you. Now, I'm not asking for volunteers yet, but I'm about to. I'm going to ask for 2 volunteers. It's a conversation that I'd like us to hear together as a learning community, and then I'd just like your reactions to it. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's a conversation between a worker and somebody receiving services. And I'm just going to ask that we all listen to it together, and then we talk about it. And I'm going to be very transparent with you about why I'm doing that. Because, folks, one of the ways that you practice and learn motivational interviewing, and I'm thinking of Levon as I say this, is you train your ear to listen for specific things. You listen to everything. Victor, you're absolutely right. You listen to everything, but you're paying, and you're paying a special attention to particular language that the person is offering, because there are things you can do with that language. Okay? And to Victor's point, you are listening to everything. And your goal as you're listening is to try to understand where the person really is. So the reason I've kind of switched up the course and I want to start with this conversation is because I want you to get into the habit of listening to these conversations and then being able to identify what you take away from the conversation. And the more we work together, the more you practice together, the more refined your hearing will become. Because you will learn to hear with an MI practice informed ear, which will then inform you to be able to speak with an MI informed verbalization or choice of tools or skills, because you intentionally choose what you're going to use next. So Now is the point where I will ask, are there two people who would be willing to unmute? The client's name is Tara, T-A-R-A, and the worker's name, I believe, is Worker. So is there anybody that is willing to volunteer to unmute and read? Okay, Sandy, fantastic.
I'm
Sandy,
also willing.
who was that?
Crystal,
Fantastic.
I
So
have my glasses on today. I can see.
fantastic. Oh, and Levon, I thought your mic was funky. But Sandy volunteered, Crystal volunteered, Levon, trust me, there will be future opportunities. Sandy, you volunteered first. Would you like to play the client or the worker?
I'll be the client.
Fantastic. So Crystal, you will be the worker. Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
Okay. Fantastic. So I'm gonna bring the oh, Levon, you're at Brenda's computer. Okay, fantastic. So hopefully we're going to hear your voice soon. In fact, Levon, since you are able to talk, perhaps after you listen to the conversation, you can start us off with your reactions, if you're willing. So I'll just throw that out there. So Levon is going to start us off with thoughts and reactions. I'm going to just say one more thing before I turn it over to Sandy and to Crystal. And that is this. We want to listen to everything. There is often, if you're a helper, if you're a worker, there's often a pull to want to listen to more to the client. There's Levon. Hey, Levon. Great to see you. There's a pull to want to listen more to the client. I'm going to ask you to pay attention to both. Please try and listen to the worker as well as the client. So they're just, sometimes there can be a pull to want to listen to the client more. I want you to listen to both. Excellent. Okay. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Here it is. So Crystal, your name is Counselor. You have the first line. And Crystal, can you see it?
I can see it, Will.
Okay,
Yes.
great. And Sandy, can you see it as well?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, and you're reading the client. Okay.
All right.
All right. So whenever, and I'll do my best to scroll down so you can see your next line. Sometimes I screw that up a little bit, but I'll do my best so that you can see your full line. And Crystal, whenever you're ready.
All right. Hi, Tara. Good to see you. How are you doing today?
Just fine. Okay. You need to know I'm not going to long-term rehab. You, my probation officer, and the drug court want me to go, but I don't want to. Jail isn't what I want either, but I'd rather do my jail time so I can be done with all of this court crap.
I'm not here to force you to go to rehab.
Is that so? You know, it was you who sent out those referrals. And I just got a call from the intake lady at St. Agnes Long-Term Rehab. She informed me that they have a driver coming to pick me up in 2 days.
Well, you signed the releases, and your probation officer told me you're going to go away for up to 3 years if you don't take this bed. Aren't you worried about how your kids will manage without you?
Yes, I'm worried about my kids. Plus, I don't want to leave my dog. I'm worried because my ex is a garbage father and he doesn't like my dog. I'm so freaking sick of being controlled by the courts. I just can't take it anymore. I want my life back.
You're struggling to put your kids' and dogs' needs first. You're so tired of being controlled by drug court, and going to jail feels like your only way to escape the interfering control of the court system.
Yeah, I don't see myself as having good options. I need freedom from the courts and my probation officer. I do care about my kids and my dog, though don't get that twisted. I hate them seeing me as less than an adult. Using drugs and being in drug court makes me feel like a bad teenager. I don't want my kids to look down on me.
The best way that you can show them what a good parent and a healthy, sober adult looks like is to accept the long-term treatment recommendations I set up for you and show them that you're serious about getting away from drugs. That way, they can begin to see you as a healthy, sober adult again.
I get that, of course, but here's the thing. If I am no longer on probation and in drug court, I can be a happier and better mom. I'll have more money to take care of my dog and give my kids what they need. My money won't be spent on drugs anymore. My kids will understand if I make the choice to go to jail versus rehab. They know how much I hate being controlled by others and how much I want my life back.
I talked to your kids yesterday, and they let me know that they are 100% supportive of you going to long-term rehab. They're worried about you. I am too. Your kids love you and want their healthier and happy mom back. Attending long-term rehab is one of the main ways that people in your shoes can really turn their lives around and have a better chance of a sustained recovery. It's how good parents can begin to repair family problems they caused because of their drug addiction. Also, your kids mentioned that they are concerned that your dog will be given to the SPCA if you go to jail. They told me your ex and your relatives don't want the dog.
You've got it all figured out. You've covered all the bases. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is so effing messed up. Look, helper, I'm going to find a home for my dog. My kids will cope while I'm gone. They're strong and they'll forgive me. Plus, I'll be a better mom when I get back. When I get out in 3 years, I won't have to worry about court dates and random screens. I'll be able to focus on working and supporting them. It's hard to jump through all the treatment court hoops and also hold a job anyway. Plus, I've been to rehab so many times. I could teach the classes myself. I know it all, and it hasn't kept me from using.
I wish you'd let me help you. Okay, I guess I will call St. Agnes and let them know you're not accepting the bed. Is that what you really want?
Yes, I'm done with treatment and with drug court. I'm going to start working on rehoming my dog.
Excellent. End of scenario. Round of applause. Crystal, Sandy. Bam! That was fantastic. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Excellent. Again, I'm asking you for your impressions. I agree, Sonia. I'm going to give him more applause too. That was excellent. They were great. So I'm going to turn it over to Levon, who's sitting at Brenda's computer, and Ishmael's ear. Oh, Ishmael, you're there. It's Brenda's ear, maybe. Yes. Hi, Brenda. So we're going to turn it over to Levon. And Levon, you can start us off with your reactions, your thoughts. And keep in mind, folks, there's no right or wrong here. We're just, as a learning community, exploring what our take was on this conversation. Levon, please, the floor is yours. Oh, Levon, we can't hear you.
You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. And then Jolisa and Tammy want to chime in too. So
Great. So I was just real quick, right? So I was just listening, for the change talk, right? That's what I was listening for, right? And she has the, she had the change talk. It was there, it was present. She talked about struggling with her kids, how she cared about her kids, she cared about her dog, she don't want her kids to look down on her anymore. She didn't want to be controlled by court no more, so all that, is, was the change talk that I, gathered from that scenario there.
Yeah.
But also what interests me is, she addressed the counselor as, helper, right? So you already know where her is, her mindset is at, right? Just by saying, okay, look, helper, so that's what I gather from that.
Fantastic. Brenda, Ishmael, do you want to add anything since your mic is now working?
I'm good.
We're good. I'm good.
Great. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I want to underline something before we turn it over to Jolisa and Tammy. I do want to underline something that Levon said. And Levon, you have really accurate ear. I hope you're okay with me making that affirmation. You have a really accurate ear. I don't know if everybody heard this, but Levon truly identified what was most important to Tara. He identified very clearly what was most important to her. So thank you for starting us off, Levon. That was very, your ear, you really get what change talk is. So thank you for that. Jolisa, Tammy, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to point out, so yeah, there was a lot of change talk, but the most important thing that like stood out to me is that there wasn't really any questions asked. It was more of like statements and then almost like a judgment. Like, is that really what you want? Because all these bad things are gonna happen. X, Y, and Z is gonna happen, and they're all bad things. I feel like for the client, it was like really good change talk and like what we would want to see from motivational interviewing. But I feel like from the counselor's aspect, it was what not to do almost.
Say more about that, because
I feel like everything that was said from the counselor or by the counselor was a shift of like how they were perceiving it instead of the perception that the client was physically trying to state. Not only that, but how many times the client physically stated out loud, plain and simple, that this is not what they wanted. And instead of accepting that and trying to go forward, or like accepting that and trying to add on like, okay, well, what do you want to do about this situation, the dog, your kids, how do you feel about these things, leaving those open-ended questions. What do you think would happen if, an open-ended question, instead of those things coming out, and it came out as like, well, then you're gonna go to jail, your dog's gonna go away, your kids aren't gonna have a healthy, happy mom. Like, everything that was pointed out was negative things that wouldn't help anybody in the long run whatsoever, not to mention wouldn't make anybody feel very good. So I feel like the counselor should have did a better job. But that's also like just like the script itself was just not motivational interviewing as a whole. But I like that it was the change talk, and even just being able to like identify the sorry, I'm reading like the comments at the same time, but trying to like the way that she was able to identify that like she's gone to treatment how many times, and like she could teach the classes herself. Like that was her proving to her counselor or to her helper that like she's done it so many different times, like these things aren't working for her. She doesn't feel that these things are working for her, and like maybe it's time for something else to bring in that change. It may not always be what everybody wants, but again, that's the person-centered care. If that's what she wants, then that's her choice.
Yeah. Could I ask you a quick follow-up question, Jolisa?
Yeah.
Because you made a statement that I don't want to let it pass, because I'm curious if other people are feeling very similar to you. Well, actually, before I ask you this question, I want to reflect something, because it connects to what Levon said, because you both are identifying that the client offered change talk.
Yeah.
You're both clearly identifying that. So what we would call that, folks, is naturally occurring change talk. The client just naturally, during the course of the conversation, offered that. Okay, so I just want to link what Levon and Jolisa said, because it's important to understand that, because there's naturally occurring change talk, and we can intentionally also draw out or evoke change talk. Okay, but we're going to get to that another day.
Right, and it wasn't right. So there wasn't much needed, to be drawn, the change talk to be drawn out of her, because she was just so passionate about change. However she seen her change, she was passionate about it, right? Because even when the counselor was asking, those closed questions, she was answering them like they were open-ended questions. Like she was asking questions that, she could have easily said yes or no to the question that she was asking, but she, still answer them as if they was open-ended questions. So that's how Yeah, that's what I got from that.
Fantastic. Thank
She
you, Wanda.
definitely went in with like the intention of knowing and explaining herself and um her choices versus allowing somebody to try to persuade her or sway her into a different direction that she already knew that she didn't want.
Yeah, you know, there are multiple things, Jolisa, that I'd like to ask you. But I'm going to narrow it to one because it is related to this particular statement that you made, and I'm very curious about it, which is that you said, you know, it was kind of like it wasn't the practice of motivational interviewing on the counselor's part. Did I hear you correctly? I didn't
Yeah.
make that up, right?
No, that's exactly what I said. I think it was the exact opposite. It was to prove to you or to show to somebody that's exactly what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't go in with all of the answers. Even if you may feel like you have all of these opportunities, all these options, all these resources, and may have all the answers in your brain, like person-centered care isn't what you decide for somebody. Motivational interviewing isn't asking a question just to prove that you're either going to let them choose wrong or you're going to let them choose your way, which is right, right? Motivational interviewing is asking a question to be able to get that answer, to hear how they see it, why they see it, and how they think they're going to go about it. It's not a yes or a no. It's a, I need an explanation, or can you give me an explanation? Lay out the steps that you want so we can follow those. I feel like this was completely opposite, like I said, because at the end of the day, any question that was asked was basically a proof to me that this is really what you just said. Versus why would you want that? Or what's going to happen differently if you choose this way versus this path? So yeah, that's exactly what I said. I feel like that's exactly what shouldn't be done.
Okay. Before we go to Wanda, you prompt me to want to poll the whole learning community. Okay. So this poll is inspired by what Jolisa said. And the poll is this. If you agree with what Jolisa said, that this was actually the opposite of the practice of motivational interviewing, type the letter A in the chat for agree. If you disagree, type a D. And if you're unsure, type a U. And I'm not saying that there's a right answer or a wrong answer at this point, but I'm seeing a lot of A's. Jolisa, I'm seeing a lot of A's. And I just saw one U. Okay? So I'm going to use a phrase. Well, actually, I'm going to shut up and hand it over to Wanda. And then I may use a phrase if Wanda doesn't use this phrase. I'm going to use this phrase. But Wanda, I'm going to give you the floor because your hand's up.
Well, thank you. I kind of felt like the counselor was on a power trip. She had sent out the papers and she had already decided what was best for the client, even though I felt like the client stood her ground in standing up to the counselor and saying, no, that's not what works for me. And I felt like maybe the counselor should have embraced her change ideas of what may work for her. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. And you know, I think Wanda's making a really great point, and it kind of links to the thing that I wanted to say. And Wanda, tell me if you would agree with this or not. To me, this conversation feels like a missed opportunity. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The client was right there for an opportunity, right there.
Yep. Antonio Ramirez, go right ahead. The floor is yours. Wanda, thank you so much. Thank you. Go ahead, Antonio.
It was a missed opportunity because what happened was the power of control. We have to understand control is not necessary. Resistance will always be there. But when we come in, the client is resistant and we come in with the attitude of control, it burns the whole house down.
Yes. Go ahead, Mawai. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I want to just add to what everybody is saying because the counselor fueled the resistance. The client was already if the client was already comfortable with the consequences. So there was no threats or whatever that the counselor could make that was going to change that. In that client's mind, she was like, okay, if the worst thing could happen to me, I could go to jail. In her mind, she's like, okay, jail is better than going to rehab and being controlled and this, that, and the third. So you're right, it was the missed opportunity, because if the counselor could have just provided one more option or one more beneficial perspective that could have just shifted, I believe that client would have probably possibly been persuaded, particularly when you already got your mind made up to deal with the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And you know, Mawahi, you make me want to link something that Victor and Wanda said, because Wanda used the phrase of, you know, she could have embraced the change idea that the client had. And Victor, I'm thinking of you as Wanda said that, because if the worker would have simply listened to her, right, Victor? Simply listened to her, it could have had a different outcome. And Brittany, don't lose your thought. And this is connected to what Wanda said, because Wanda, you framed it as that the client stood up for herself. I'm going to go a little further and tell me if you're okay with this. I felt like the client, and it was very well portrayed, the client had to defend herself. Yeah? Okay. Jaleesa agrees with that. Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, all right. So, and to Mawahi's point, the worker created that. It didn't start that way. The worker evoked the resistance. Now, Brittany and Antonio, don't lose your thoughts, but I do want you to throw, I do want to throw something into the mix, and that is simply this. This may just be me. I don't think this worker is an evil person. I don't think this worker wanted her to go to jail. In fact, I think the worker wanted absolutely the opposite. Mm-hmm. So keep in mind, you can care, you can want to help, and your approach and what you do can actually drive the person to choose jail. So just keeping that in mind. Brittany, you're a saint. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. So like they were talking about earlier, that advocating for herself, I think it's very important to point out that we tell a lot of our clients, or that's what we talk to our clients a lot about, is advocating for ourselves and themselves, because when they first come in, a lot of them are always passive or always trying to please other people. And I think that in this instant, the counselor was leaning a little bit towards the fixing reflex. She was wanting to fix the person, fix the problem. And the client was already ready to change. But if it had been a different client or a different situation where the client was self-talking and they were a passive person, she could have sent them to rehab and they could have not been at the point to have been ready, and it would have been a wasted bed, or it could have been a relapse. It could have thrown them into something worse than what they were already previously facing.
Yep. Yes. And that could have been because the person wanted to people please the counselor, or for a lot of other reasons, because they couldn't advocate for themselves. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Antonio Ramirez, the floor is yours. And then we'll go right to you, Victor. I see that you're unmuted. Go ahead.
I still go back to control. Control was a factor in that. The counselor just, you cannot come in with that kind of mind state. You cannot come in with that kind of aspect. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. That's not how you set the table. That's probably why you push the client to go to jail. Well, shit, I don't need to deal with you. You're not here to help me. I got a whole bunch of people that's been in my face not trying to help me. Right. I keep saying it, and I keep saying it over. And it's also through your lens that I've able to see this, Paul. Through trial and error, man, you got to give people the opportunity to make their own choices. I'm only here to make suggestions. You know what I mean? I'm not here to tell you what to do. That's why I said about that walk. I'm not here to walk in front of you. I'm not here to walk behind you. I want to walk side by side. You tell me, even when I meet my clients for the first time, I don't pick the day and time that we meet with each other. They do. You tell me what works best for you, and then we'll grow from there. That's the process that I have developed. And I'm not perfect, and I'm not striving for imperfection or whatever it is that they say. All I'm saying is if I make mistakes, I own up to it. But that is not how you address someone in the first introduction or the orientation of meeting a client. You will make them check out immediately. So just be mindful of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to go to Victor, and then we're going to go to Jolisa, and then I'm going to share my screen with you to just review a couple of things that very directly relate to this scenario and to everything you're all saying. And I'm really glad that I shifted things and brought this scenario to the table earlier as opposed to later. So I'm really glad I'm glad I did that. Victor, the floor is yours.
So one of the things you said is that the counselor is not a bad person. I'm sure the counselor had good intentions. Good intentions. You know, what's best, jail or the program? However, the client wasn't ready. The client didn't want to be told what's the best thing. She wanted to decide for herself what's the best thing. And even if at the end of the conversation with the counselor, had the client agreed, it would have not been what she wanted, so it probably wouldn't work. It
Very
probably
similar
wouldn't
to what
work.
Brittany said. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So what the gentleman just said is absolutely right. You can't impose your will on a client. You know, you can make suggestions, and of course, you always have to leave the answer up to the client, because the client is the one that's gonna benefit from the process or suffer the consequences from their choices. So it's actually up to the client.
Thank you, Victor. Jolisa, the floor is yours.
Well, first off, I just want to like go off of like what Victor just said. Like,
Yeah.
I agree, because especially for like the fact of like readiness for change, like that's one of the first things that you're gonna do, like for, well, a counselor would do out of like the DSM-5, but like in any treatment process, right? Like your initial assessment is based off of readiness for change as one of the biggest things, right? And like she clearly stated a multitude of times she wasn't ready for that change, like she wasn't willing to step up for that change. But also I wanted to emphasize off of like what Brenda said, because she was explaining in the comments about more of listening and reflecting on what the patient says and less hearing to respond. And that's exactly what the counselor was doing, was listening to respond, listening to argue, and listening to prove her points versus listening to what the client actually was stating, what she wanted. Because if she would have listened, like when I was listening to it and like I was feeling like it was the exact opposite of what motivational interviewing is, that's exactly what I was thinking, is like every single time that she said something, it wasn't listening to understand why or where, even though those things were overly explained and didn't have to be whatsoever, right? Like those questions weren't asked in a manner of getting those answers. It was asked of like, that's really what you want. It was a yes or no, and it wasn't like an open-ended based question. Instead of understanding and listening to understand, it was more of just an argumentative way of basically it's my way or you're going to go to jail, which at the end of the day, her options were treatment or jail. Like it wasn't just your way. It's just the fact that she was not ready to go to treatment. She didn't believe or agree that treatment was helpful or working for her, which she already stated, but those things weren't answered and those things weren't listened to. And again, she continuously overly explained herself, but it wasn't actually connecting in the counselor's brain. From what I see in the responses.
Absolutely. And what was connecting, and you've identified this, I think, really clearly, what was connecting is the counselor was listening so that she could continue to make her argument as to why Tara should do what she wanted her to do.
Yeah.
Don't you want your kids to be proud of you? Don't you want to make sure your dog is safe?
Yep. Well, your dog's not going to go home anymore then. Your family doesn't want them. Your kids already stated this. Like now you're also sticking her kids against the dog and against the family. Like you're pitting all of these elements that would make her want to change. The only things that she stated that would make her want to change, or the reasons that she was willing to change, are you're now pitting them all against each other, which again would in somebody's brain, an active addiction, that would make you feel helpful or helpless, hopeless even. Like she had no opportunity to fight for herself or to agree for herself unless it was to go against the one person that was showing her help. And that's not how that should be, first of all. But also, again, you're already making her feel helpless and hopeless. You're not being helpful by making her think that the one person that is helping her is also going to be pitted against her because she's not choosing her way, which is almost what it seemed to be in the end. So now the dog's homeless. The kids aren't going to have their mother. The kids and the family are arguing. The family doesn't want the dog. And now the one person that she's gone to continuously is telling her that she's choosing the wrong option over and over again, even when she's trying to explain why she's choosing these options.
i.e., I'm disappointed in you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like how I can't fathom the fact of like, if that was a real client, like where would they be? You know what I mean? What would they go and do? Like, it was bothering me really bad. And that's why I was like, I'm sorry, like if this is like a disagree upon, but like, I was like, this is not motivational interviewing. This is not okay. So I had to
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
and again, I wanted this. Well, you know, the thing I want to throw out too, folks, is do you think these kind of, Wanda, don't lose your thought. Do you think these kind of conversations actually happen between workers and clients? Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of people nodding their heads and giving thumbs up. And Luana writes all the time. Okay? And again, it's not because these folks are evil people. It's because they're not listening carefully. They're not meeting the person where the person is at. And they don't understand. They don't hear what Lavon and Jolisa heard. They don't hear the change talk because what they're listening for is for the person to do what they want them to do. Okay? Wanda, the floor is yours, and then I'm going to share my screen. Go right ahead.
I was thinking about what you said about missed opportunity, and something tragic could have happened to this client at rehab. That was an opportunity to find out more information and perhaps just hear her out. So I just really think there were a lot of missed opportunities.
Yep. I couldn't agree, and I want to thank everybody who put things in the chat as well. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I also want to acknowledge if anybody put something in the chat that you really, really want to emphasize, that you either want to elaborate on or you just want to read what you put out loud, don't hesitate to unmute and do that. I don't want you to feel like the contribution you made in the chat doesn't have value, because it does. And I believe people in the learning community are reading what's in the chat, and I'm reading as much of it as I can. So if I've missed something that you really want to emphasize, please feel free to unmute and do that. If yeah, okay. So just feel free to do that if you want to. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And keep in mind, folks, that we started this whole thing and got into the scenario with what you already know about motivational interviewing, which is fantastic and clearly very rich. And using the scenario, I think, is a good way to help bring out additionally what you know. And to Jolissa's passionate point, we can be pretty affirmed that that was not the practice of motivational interviewing. And I will be very clear with you that if at moments it appeared to be the practice of motivational interviewing, what I'd like you to consider is what the worker was doing is using some of the skills, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, or summaries. They may have been using the skills, but they were not intentionally practicing motivational interviewing. So just being very clear about that. We've talked about ambivalence. Do not read this definition. I know it's in big print, but don't, Nadia looks up to read it. Don't read it, Nadia. do not read, excellent, do not read this definition. And I want to go back to something that Mawahi said earlier about mixed feelings, being on the fence. Mawahi didn't say being on the fence, but that's a phrase that sometimes gets used with ambivalence. And I'm going to say this A word, and when I say it, I want you to type a particular word into the chat, okay? And I'm going to tell you what the word is I'd like you to type in the chat so you can all be successful at doing this. And I'm going to ask everybody in the learning community, if you're able to type this word into the chat after I say the A word. And the word I'd like you to type, don't do it yet, don't say it until I say the A word. The word I'd like you to type is opportunity. Don't type it yet. Don't type it yet. So ambivalence, you can type it now, about a particular behavioral change goal is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. Ambivalence about a particular behavioral change. That's a lot of opportunities I see in the chat. That's fantastic. So if you have not yet typed the word opportunity into the chat, please do. So a couple of things I want you to keep in mind about ambivalence. It's common. I'm not going to ask this, but I bet if I said to everybody in this learning community, everybody, and I'm not asking you to do this, but if you've ever experienced ambivalence in your life, raise your hand. You don't need to do that. Nadia, you don't need to do it. It's all right. Sometimes, Nadia, people raise both of their hands. So it's common. It's also it's normal. It's also part of the human experience. Migdalia, did you want to add something, or are you raising your hand because you felt ambivalent? If there's something you want to say or add, feel free to unmute. Okay. I guess you're raising your hand because you've experienced ambivalence. It's also, excuse me, it's also part of the change process. When someone is considering a change, if they're ambivalent about that change, that ambivalence in that consideration is usually there. There's a part of them that's kind of weighing, well, this is kind of why I want to do it. This is kind of why I don't want to do it. So that can be going on. And it's not resistance. Ambivalence is not the same thing as resistance. Resistance means no way, no how, I'm not considering this. And ambivalence means, I'm not going to take any action at this particular point, but there may be a tiny part of me that is considering, maybe I could make this change. And there's another part of me considering not wanting to take or make the change. So be very clear. When someone is ambivalent, they are not being resistant, especially if they are talking to you about both sides of the ambivalence. And Migdalia, I just want to check again, is there anything you wanted to say? Because your hand is still up. Just want to make sure if there's anything you wanted to say that you go ahead and unmute and do that. And I'm going to lower your hand, but if there is anything you want to say, don't hesitate to unmute to do that. So, keeping in mind, folks, we're talking about the practice of motivational interviewing. In order to practice MI, there needs to be certain conditions. And you already know, because you typed the word opportunity in the chat, that there needs to be ambivalence about a particular behavioral change goal. So, first and foremost, when we're practicing MI, we are engaging in a client-centered, not a worker-centered like we saw in the scenario, like we heard in the scenario, a client-centered conversation between collaborating partners. And partners means I have power and you have power, and we're sharing that power. The scenario is a good example of the worker having decided what is best, maybe because of the fixing reflex, and listening for what she can use to convince Tara that she should go to rehab. That is not a conversation that's client-centered, nor is it two collaborating partners. The conversation when we're practicing motivational interviewing is focused on the specific behavior change that the person feels ambivalent about. Part of them wants to make the change, another part of them doesn't want to make the change. And I want to link this to what Victor said about listening, because I couldn't agree with Victor more that listening isn't central to the practice of motivational interviewing. And while we are listening, we are intentionally guiding the conversation to stay focused on exploring the ambivalence, the both sides. Why the person is considering the change, their desire to make the change, their ability to make the change, their reasons to make the change, or their need to make the change, and why they don't want to make the change. We're exploring both. And we are helping that person to identify and increase their personal, sometimes referred to as intrinsic, motivations or motivation as to why they're considering the behavior change. So we're guiding the conversation in two very intentional ways. So that is what constitutes the practice of motivational interviewing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want to underline something that has come up in our conversation that we're going to talk more about when we meet next time. And that is how we want to relationally interact. Remember, it's a client-centered conversation between two collaborating partners. There's guidance about how we want to manifest or play out, take our role in the relationship. And that is what we mean when we're talking about am I spirit or an am I consistent approach. We're going to talk much more about that when we see each other next time. Okay? I'm checking the chat for just a quick moment. And Wanda adds, would you suggest that an open mind is important in motivational interviewing? Wanda, I would suggest it highly because absolutely, because the scenario gave a great example of the worker not having an open mind. It was a great example of the worker, and I'm going to put it this way. You may disagree with this. You may think it's too strong, but I'm going to put it this way. I think that worker was trying to save the client. She was trying to save her from jail because she thought that that was the best choice for the client. Okay, Sarah agrees with me on that one. Okay, fantastic. And a couple of other people seem to. Wanda agrees as well. All right, so yeah, and Carol says, yes, she does. I agree with you, Carol. Antonio Ramirez, go ahead. You have the floor.
I mean, I totally agree with you on that aspect, but it was the approach. The table wasn't set correctly.
Agreed.
The table was not set correctly. And I'm not saying that she didn't have good intentions. I'm not saying that most of us that come into the introduction of meeting a client for the first time does not have the best interest at heart, but it's the way we approach the situation. And I'm speaking from my trials, my errors. I've had many clients get up and walk out of my office because I didn't approach it the right way. So I got better by coming to trainings like this and initiating motivational interviewing and understanding that I got to give them 80% and I take the 20.
Thank you, Antonio. And, you know, Antonio makes a great point that I want to build on, which is when we're in and I love your imagery, Antonio, when we're in a conversation with a client and we realize this ain't going so well, we can reset the table. And that's called the course correction. But this, you'd have to let go of your agenda. You'd have to let go of trying to convince the client to go to rehab. So to Antonio's point, it is about the approach, and we can reset the table if we have enough self-awareness that this is not working. We are wrestling, we're not dancing. Caroline writes in the chat, can I make a request? Can people and you make suggestions for books to read and podcasts to listen to? The only time I have time is in the car, so I prefer listening resources if possible. Excellent. So if anybody has any listening podcast resources that they'd like to make, please put them in the chat. Caroline, thank you for asking for that. That's great.
I just find it so helpful that when we have so many brilliant minds, there are so many resources.
Yes, absolutely. And that is the benefit of the learning community, because it's strong with resources. And I will just throw one out, and I'm not making a commercial for myself at all. I'm just sharing it as a resource. A colleague of mine, Amy Shanahan, who is also a member of Mint, a number of years ago, we were hired by the University of Reno, Nevada, to develop an MI podcast. And our podcast, and it won't surprise you, is called Lions and Tigers and Bears MI. And you can Google that and it will bring it up. I think there are 36 episodes of it. That exactly, Michael, that's a lot. There are 36 episodes. And it is the style of it may work for you. We do invite some guests on, and let me also say there are many podcasts on motivational interviewing, but I know that one because I'm part of it. So I would just share that as a resource too. All right, so I am going to share my screen one more time, and as I do that, I'm going to ask everybody to ponder a question. And you can ponder this question while I'm sharing my screen. Oh, Jolisa adds, I listen to TED Talks when in the shower, while driving, and in the mornings before work. Fantastic. Thank you. And Jolisa, if there is a particular TED Talk you think might be relevant to MI, feel free to put that in the chat as well. So this is the question I'm going to ask you to, oh, and Mawahi's put one in the chat too. Lisa Ardner 16 at, okay, monthly coaching group online. Okay, thank you, Mawahi. That's great. Learning communities and practice communities can also be helpful too. You know, where you get together with people who want to practice motivational interviewing, you take turns practicing and then offering each other supportive feedback and possibly an opportunity for growth. Oh, and Sarah writes, I'm now following Lions, Tigers, and Bears MI. Looking forward to listening. Okay. All right. Well, Sarah, you can give your unvarnished and true opinion of whether you give it a thumbs up in the middle or a thumbs down. So.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you. And can you listen on the phone? Yes, you can, Celeste. You can certainly listen on your phone. I think it's on Spotify, and I think you can get it through the Rural and Frontier ATTC as well. But if you Google Lions and Tigers and Bears MI, it'll come up. So this is the question I'd like you to ponder. We've been together a little less, perhaps 6 minutes less than 2 hours. As Caroline said, we have a very rich learning community. And the thing I'm going to ask you to think about, if there's one thing that stands out to you about your experience in our learning community today, what's the one thing that maybe rises to the top and stands out for you about your experience in our learning community today. There's no right or wrong here. It's just about your experience. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to ask you to ponder that question. And then if there's anybody at the conclusion who wants to share the one thing that stands out to them, they're free to. Celeste has already put something in the chat. I feel refreshed and am I? Excellent. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And again, please ponder that question, and we will see if anybody wants to unmute and comment on that. So there are 3 essential components that are the backbone of motivational interviewing. The first one, and the one we're going to just take a minute to focus on, is what's called MI spirit. The way we are. It's also referred to as an MI consistent approach. It's the way we are. And I'm going to use Antonio's language. It's how we set the table as we walk into the room. It's what we walk in with. It's our mindset and our heart set. And I will define that. There's also something called the 4 tasks. And this outlines the work that we do when we practice motivational interviewing. And we'll go over what those 4 tasks are very specifically. And then the one that just about everybody knows about are the core communication skills, ORS, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. These are the core communication skills, not exclusive or invented by motivational interviewing or Bill Miller or Stephen Rolnick. They're simply the tools that we can use intentionally when we have the opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. All right? When we come back next, we are going to start by talking about this interpersonal relationship, your most powerful tool. So I'd like you to be thinking about that until we see each other on Monday. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. And I'm just going to ask, is there anybody who would be willing to unmute and would like to share what stands out to you most about your experience in our learning community today? And Sarah, I see that you're unmuted. I don't know if that is that intentional?
It was.
Okay,
It was.
okay, great.
So I know we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, you
So
can start us off.
To me, it really kind of reinforced the conversation between the counselor and the client of what we as a counselor are bringing to the conversation. So I am a licensed professional counselor in training. I've been doing this for about a year. This is a career change for me. And what really kind of continues to stand out for me is my efforts in wanting to help and sort of fix the client, because I think sometimes clients come to us, and I mean, I've had clients say, fix me, what's wrong with me, give me advice, what can I do? And I kind of the pressure I put on myself, pressure I had in my career before this of always kind of having to prove myself. I think sometimes I come from that place of sort of having to prove myself, and I'm new at this, but look at how good I'm doing, and that sort of thing. So it really just kind of reinforced to me that I'm not here to fix them. And I do say that to people that, I'm real blunt with that. I'm not here to fix you, but then I kind of have to embrace that myself. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks. I think we have time for, is there one other person who might like to unmute and just one thing that stands out to you about your experience in our learning community today?
Yeah, I'd like to share.
Go ahead, Michael, please.
Yeah. So just the one thing that really stuck out to me, and like definitely something I'll be taking forward with me in my interactions with patients that we have here, is that ambivalence is not resistance. And I think that that's incredible. Like being torn in between 2 is not, I'm not help rejecting, just that I'm torn in between 2 major decisions. So thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you, Michael. Folks, I cannot thank you enough. I'm really looking forward to seeing you on Monday. I hope that you're all going to be able to come back. Please come back if you can. It would be great to see you on Monday, and I look forward to continuing our conversation. And again, thank you so much for what you brought to the table. And remember, we are going to talk, we're going to start with focus on the interpersonal relationship, how we are while we're interacting. Take good care, folks. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.